Picture this. You're cleaning out your closet on a Sunday afternoon, determined, this time you mean it, to finally get rid of some stuff. You pull out a shoebox you haven't opened in 3 years. Inside, a ticket stub from a concert you barely remember, a pen that doesn't work, a keychain from a city you visited once in 2011, and a birthday card from someone you haven't spoken to since college. And you stand there, holding that dead pen, and you think, I might need this. So you put it back. Sound familiar? If it does, you've probably been called a hoarder, or a pack rat, or whatever affectionate insult the people in your life use when they notice that your junk drawer has a junk drawer. And here's what's interesting, and this is what nobody ever talks about. The people who struggle most to let things go are often some of the most emotionally intelligent, deeply feeling, meaning-making people out there. They're not lazy. They're not irrational. Their brains are just working overtime in ways that are actually kind of fascinating. So let's pull that apart today. Let's get into the real psychology of why some people genuinely cannot throw things away, and what that says about how their minds work, how they love, and how they experience the world. Let's start with something researchers call the endowment effect. It's one of the most reliable findings in behavioral psychology, and it basically means this. The moment something becomes yours, it immediately becomes more valuable to you. Not in an objective sense, not because it's worth more money, but psychologically, emotionally, the weight of it in your hands feels heavier. In a famous experiment by psychologist Richard Thaler, people were given coffee mugs and then offered the chance to trade them for chocolate bars of equivalent value. Most people refused. They'd owned the mug for about 15 minutes, and already they didn't want to let it go. That's not greed. That's not stupidity. That's your brain doing exactly what it was built to do. Attach meaning to things you've touched, claimed, and called your own. Now take that instinct and multiply it by 30 years of accumulated living, and you start to understand why Grandma still has the plastic bags from 1987. But here's where it gets deeper. Because for a lot of people who struggle to declutter, objects aren't just objects. They're memories wearing costumes. That receipt from your first solo trip. That ugly mug your kid painted at school when they were 6. That sweater you'll never wear again, but belonged to someone you lost. When you throw the thing away, it doesn't just leave your house. Your brain interprets it as losing the memory itself, as if the past could evaporate. Neurologically, there's something to this. Our brains associate physical objects with the neural pathways tied to specific memories and emotions. When you hold something, you activate that whole network. The smell of old paper, the texture of a familiar fabric. These aren't just sensory experiences, they're portals. And some brains are more susceptible to that portal than others. There's actually a beautiful word in Welsh, hiraeth. It doesn't translate cleanly into English, but it roughly means a deep, aching longing for home, or for something you can't fully return to. A sense of nostalgia mixed with grief. A lot of people who struggle to let things go are in a way fluent in hiraeth. They feel time moving. They understand on some level that things end and people change, and the past is always receding. And so they hold on, not because they're confused about reality, but because they feel it too acutely. Now I want to stop here and talk about something most people never consider, the role of identity. Because one of the lesser-known psychological functions of our possessions is that they help tell us, and everyone else, who we are. Psychologists call this extended self theory, introduced by consumer behavior researcher Russell Belk. The idea is that our belongings become part of how we define ourselves. That guitar you haven't played in 8 years, it's not just a guitar, it's proof that you're someone who plays guitar. Or someone who used to, or someone who still might. Throwing it out doesn't just clear up space, it forces a reckoning with identity, with who you were, who you are, and whether you're okay with the distance between those two people. That's not a small thing, that's genuinely emotionally heavy. And yet we hand people a trash bag and say, just get rid of it. No wonder it doesn't work. Let me bring in another piece of the puzzle here, anxiety, specifically the relationship between uncertainty and holding on. For some people, the reluctance to throw things away is rooted in what psychologists call just-in-case thinking. You keep the broken blender because appliances are expensive, and what if yours breaks one day? You keep every cable and adapter in a tangled nest because technology is unpredictable, and you might need that one. This is your brain doing something it genuinely believes is intelligent, preparing for future scarcity. And here's the thing. For some people, particularly those who grew up with financial instability or who lived through periods of real loss, this is not irrational at all. It's a survival strategy that was learned in a real context and never quite got updated. The environment changed, the wiring didn't. Research by psychologist Randy Frost, who has spent decades studying hoarding and clutter, found that people who struggle to discard objects often have unusually strong beliefs about the utility of objects, even broken or duplicate ones, and a heightened emotional response to the idea of wasting something. Many of them were raised in environments where wastefulness was morally wrong, where things were scarce, or where losing something had real consequences. Their sensitivity to loss is calibrated to a world they may no longer live in. But the brain doesn't update its settings automatically. You have to teach it. And then there are the perfectionists. Because hoarding and perfectionism don't seem like they travel together, but they absolutely do. Frost's research found a strong overlap. For some people, the inability to throw something away is partly about indecision. They can't decide if they truly want to keep something, and because they're afraid of making the wrong choice, the permanent, irreversible wrong choice, they make no choice at all. The object stays, the pile grows, and every pile becomes a monument to unmade decisions, which then triggers shame, which makes the whole project feel even more overwhelming, which is why they shut the closet door and go watch television instead. This is a loop that's very hard to break from the outside, but incredibly easy to understand from the inside. If you've ever been stuck in that loop, you know exactly what I mean. There's one more layer I want to add, because I think it's the most human one. Some people hold on to things as a way of holding on to relationships. Every object from someone they loved or lost is a kind of proxy for the person themselves. A coffee cup from a grandmother who's no longer here. A t-shirt from an ex that still, somehow, smells like them. A child's drawing, age 5, the spelling all wrong and the sun enormous in the corner of the page. These objects are not clutter. They are altars. They are the physical evidence that certain people existed, that certain moments happened, that love occurred and was real. And you cannot explain that away with a bin bag. Psychologists who study grief have actually found that maintaining physical connections to lost loved ones through objects, photographs, rituals is not pathological. It's normal. It becomes complicated only when it significantly interferes with daily functioning. For most people who struggle to let things go, it's not at that level. It's just love made tangible. And maybe there's something worth honoring in that instead of something to be fixed. So where does all of this leave us? Let me be honest with you about something. There's an entire industry built around decluttering. The Marie Kondos, the minimalist influencers, the 30-day challenges, the storage solutions. And a lot of that advice is genuinely useful, but it misses the emotional core of why letting go is hard. It treats the objects as the problem, when the objects are really symptoms of identity, of memory, of anxiety, of grief, of love. You can fold a shirt into a perfect rectangle, but you cannot tidy up the fact that it belonged to your father. What actually helps, what the research consistently points toward, is not ruthlessness. It's meaning-making. Not, does this spark joy? But rather, what is this object doing for me right now? And is that what I need? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is, I've been holding on to this because I couldn't face letting go of what it represented, and I think I'm ready now. And sometimes you don't have to decide today. Progress, for people who struggle with this, rarely looks like a clean house overnight. It looks like one drawer, one question, one honest conversation with yourself. It looks like understanding that your impulse to keep things is not a character flaw, it's a signal. It's your brain telling you that meaning matters to you, that relationships matter to you, that the past is not just something that happened, It's something that lives in you, and you're trying to take care of it. That's not hoarding. That's being human. And if any part of what I talked about today resonated with you, whether you see yourself in the story or someone you love, I'd really encourage you to sit with that for a minute. The most powerful thing about understanding the psychology behind our behaviors is that it replaces shame with curiosity. And curiosity is where change actually begins. If you want to keep exploring stuff like this, the strange, beautiful, deeply weird ways that human minds work, hit subscribe, because this is what we do here. And drop a comment below. What's one thing you've been holding on to for longer than makes logical sense? No judgment. I'll go first in the comments. See you in the next one.